Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. I want to start by saying that I am no longer with the U.S. government. I come here as a private citizen. I am here solely as a private citizen from the Trump administration, and I come here because we are frustrated. The former Trump administration officials and many of the American people are frustrated. And we're frustrated because we saw this historic agreement, economic agreement, 4 agreements that were negotiated for the people of Kosovo and for the people of Serbia. This was not done for the governments. This was not political. This was solely economic development. We've watched from the United States as too many people from Kosovo, too many young people from Kosovo and too many young people from Serbia have moved to Germany, moved to Hungary, moved to Poland because they couldn't get good jobs. And so what we tried to do was negotiate economic agreements that would bring good paying jobs to the region. And if you look at what we negotiated, we started with a historic flight between Pristina and Belgrade. The reason we did that is because the business community, the Western business community, the American business community told us we need a flight in order to bring jobs here. There is this idea in this region of a perceived conflict. And I don't know if you understand what that means, but many Westerners think that there's hostilities going on and they think that there's a conflict going on. And so what ends up happening is businesses don't move here because of a perceived conflict. What happened over the last couple of weeks is also frustrating for Americans because what we wanted to see is these economic agreements implemented, some very good ones. Fundamental to the economic agreements, to be able to implement these economic agreements, was one point, and that was for 1 year, both sides were going to stop the recognition and the derecognition campaigns for 1 year. It was from September 4th, 2020 to September 4th, 2021. That point was pretty historic. To be able to say, let's stop trying to recognize and derecognize each other, and let's just concentrate on economic development. If you took that 1 year reprieve and implemented the flights between Pristina and Belgrade and implemented the cargo and the railway and the car agreements to be able to have this open border, to be able to have commerce flowing, businesses would have moved here already. You would have seen American businesses and Western businesses already creating jobs. That could have been done over the last 14 months. Think about that. For the last 14 months, instead of growing jobs, instead of making good paying jobs for the people of Kosovo and the people of Serbia, we instead have had very little movement. And that's what makes us frustrated. We worked very hard on these economic agreements. They should be implemented. This is not about President Trump. This is not about governments. This is about the people. This is about young people. We want to see young people stay in this region and have really good paying jobs. That was our whole focus. When we started our negotiations, we avoided the political conversations of the past because for 20 years we've talked about politics. And for 20 years we haven't talked about economic development. American business people want to be able to come here and create jobs. What I'm doing now, again, in the private sector, is I'm in this region. I was just in Albania. I've spent the last couple of days in Kosovo. and I just drove up from Pristina, and I'm driving to Belgrade, and I'll spend the next couple of days in Serbia. What I'm trying to do is implement these economic agreements now from the private sector side. I'm trying to find economic opportunities where Western businesses and American businesses can invest in this region and build jobs. I'm not just doing this when I'm inside of government. Now that I'm outside of government, I'm trying to do what I can by bringing the private sector here. The way to do that is for the governments to implement the agreements. Stop the politics and let's create jobs. That's my message today.
Is Albin Kurti's government still a problem for Trump administration? And also, is it true that you gave LDK a week to bring down the Kurtis government last year?
So, we get these same types of questions from the media, which I just have to say, I think you all have to be able to look to the future. These are silly questions. I've answered them so many times. No, I did not say that. What I made clear to the leaders in Kosovo is what American policy was, which is the 100% tariffs was a bad idea, and that America was not going to invest under the Trump administration in policies and programs and give American tax dollars to programs when the government was undermining those programs with tariffs. That wasn't good economic policy. I made clear to the leaders in Kosovo that we would not be able to support those programs. That's all I said. They calculated that without the American support, that they would have to make political decisions. I never suggested any political decisions. They made those political decisions after I made clear that the Trump administration could not support any programs when there was 100% tariffs on.
How do you comment the dialogue now?
There is no dialogue now. And this is the frustration. Look, I got criticized a lot when I was in government because they say that I didn't include the Europeans, right? That was one of the criticisms. And that's not true. I included the French and the Germans. I briefed them constantly. Remember, I was U.S. ambassador to Germany. And so I had very close connections to the national security advisor in Germany. And I briefed him regularly. I briefed the French national security advisor as well. Not as regularly as I did the German, but I briefed him. And so what I would say is this idea that we're waiting on Brussels is frustrating. It's frustrating not just for the EU talks, but it's frustrating on a variety of levels for America. We want to see more action, and I think the European Union has to be able to take more action. What my strategy is to brief the French and the Germans and let them then go to Brussels to see if they needed some more action.
And what about the role of Joe Biden administration?
Look, I think that the Biden administration has to be much more aggressive on leadership. They don't have an ambassador in Kosovo. They don't have a presidential envoy for the region. There are not a lot of talks going on. We haven't seen them talk about this, let's say, at the UN when Joe Biden was there. I haven't seen any statements from Joe Biden when we had hostilities. I haven't seen Joe Biden talk about the economic normalization agreements. I haven't seen Secretary Blinken to the region. I haven't seen Secretary Blinken talk about the economic normalization. Showing up once in the future, which they might do, is not good enough. You have to have people who are willing to say, let's move forward. Again, I'll just emphasize this. I think politics gets in the way. I think what Donald Trump's administration as an outsider did was say, let's remove the political talk and let's do what Donald Trump does best, which is create jobs, create momentum in the economy, and that's what we were trying to do here.
Gospodine Grenell,
Yes.
nažalost ne govorim najbolje engleski, kolege će prevesti.
No problem.
Kako komentarišete pismo koje su protiv Srbije i Vučića pisali kongresmeni gospodinu Bajdenu i kako komentarišete to što Priština i dalje ne sprovodi ni jedan od sporazuma, ni briselski, ni vašingtonski?
What is about your opinion about the letter to koje je poslao pismo?
Sedmorica kongresmena.
About letter from 7 of congressmen of the United States to the Vučić and Serbia, and what is your opinion about agreement which doesn't
Not invitation for Kosovo, Serbia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Meeting for
Yeah.
democracy.
So first of all, let me talk a little bit about this letter from some Congress people. I think they're wrong. They haven't looked at this region. They don't know what's going on here, and they're just talking from Washington D.C. Because look, we just saw this this person from Serbia make this wild accusation about me, saying that I was getting paid this exorbitant amount of money by the Serb government. That is obviously not true at all. It's totally fake news. I don't even think the media should be reporting on that. That's gossip. And when you look at facts, I think the media have a responsibility to report just the facts, not some guy talking and making accusations. That's wild and crazy. But I will say this to the Congress people. This person said this outrageous comment in Serbia. It seems to me that there's a freedom of the press to be able to say whatever you want, because we've got this guy spouting off with fake news. He's got every right to say it, even though it's totally wrong. And I can deny it, and anybody who knows the facts can deny it. But the guy gets to say what he wants. That's freedom. Freedom of speech and freedom of the press, because a whole bunch of people in Serbia reported it, even though it's wildly wrong. So I would say that it's good to have some freedoms, but with freedoms come responsibilities to be able to do it. Now,
about agreements which Pristina doesn't implement.
the
Used to implement about association and I don't know, couple of
But-
agreements from Bristol.
The Association of Serb Municipalities here in Kosovo with executive.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into a lot of political stuff. I'm going to try to talk about the economics, but I will say this: one thing that we were frustrated to see in Kosovo, there's a huge need to get rid of the coal plant. It's dirty, it's unhealthy, and what we saw from the current government is a rejection of the money that the Americans wanted to put forward to have clean, renewable gas. Gas is cheaper than coal. It would have been cheaper energy for the people of Kosovo, and it would have been much, much healthier to move us towards that system. And when the current government rejected the money to build a gas pipeline, that's not good for the people of Kosovo, and we needed to make that more clear on the American side. And I wished that the U.S. Embassy would have been more clear, because our U.S. policy is to make sure that we have cleaner and renewable energies. And I think that the embassy missed the opportunity to really come out strongly for clean, renewable energy.
Mr. Grenell, last year when you were envoy
Yeah.
to the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, when we were about to reach an agreement with Serbia, the specialized court in Hague indicted President Thaci with war crimes. Have you seen the work of specialized court, and also have you been in contact with former president or anybody who is in specialized court right now?
So I've spoken with President Thaci, former President Thaci. I think that look, we gotta have the judicial system do its work. I wish that they would have been a lot faster. I think it's shameful that it took 20 years to get to this point. I think that the court is very political. They saw that we were moving towards an agreement. And I think that the Europeans should do something about that, because when you politicize judicial processes, you have to be very careful, because when somebody else comes in power, then you've created this terrible system where politics permeates into the system, and I think that's terrible. I'll take one more question, and then
The lost.
look at those adorable puppies that I could take back to America.
Who did you meet here, Mr. Grenell?
I don't want to
And
go.
Why not? And why not the Prime Minister Kurti?
Yeah, I don't want to go into details of who I spoke to because I really spoke to a whole bunch of different people. Again, my focus was not politics, but on the economic situation. So thank you all very much for coming out.